welcome everyone to a new episode of the SBE Podcast. After a long break, we are back to sharing stories of interesting people here at this faculty of the School of Business and Economics in Maastricht. Today, I'm particularly excited to welcome Didier Fouarge to this podcast episode because I feel like Didier is doing very interesting work that is very relevant to a lot of students also here at this faculty and also prospective students. And firstly, just to get the formalities out the way, you are a professor of economics here at SBE, but also the director of the Research Center for Education and the Labor Market. Yes. So really it's all about the interplay between education and the labor market, and that's why I'm very excited to talk about this and the following conversation. So Didier, thank you for taking the time and welcome to the episode.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Super. Then I would say let's start right into it. And as always, we try to also learn a bit more about the people behind the name and behind the titles. So the question I would actually like to start with is maybe a quite simple question, but I'm very interested in it, which is what makes you get up in the morning? You know, what is your drive? What is your why?
Well, I think I have a couple of drives that make me stand up in the morning. You know, one of them is my family. So I have 3 children. I mean, 2 of them are almost out of the house, but my youngest is still there. And, you know, I like bringing her to the dance and these kind of things. You know, that's one of the things that make me get up. Other things is nice weather. I like cycling. So if it's good weather, but also when it's bad weather, by the way, I still get up and step on my bike and go for some biking. You know, these are things that I like.
Very cool. Maybe also could you share where did you actually grow up? Are you from the Netherlands or?
No, I'm from the French-speaking part of Belgium. So I was born in Namur, which is along the Maas River, 100 kilometers to the south of Maastricht, if you follow the river. And I lived there for all my youth, basically. I also studied in Namur. I studied economics there, and as a student, I spent a year in an Erasmus exchange program at Maastricht University in 1991-92. Then returned back to Namur. Then spent half a year at Tilburg University in the last year of my master's program. And there I got a offer for a PhD position at Tilburg University. So French-speaking part of Belgium, Namur, very nice city. Go there if you want. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I'll add it to my list. And thank you also for sharing. One thing I'm also curious about is, well, in academics, there are different journeys for the individuals, also becoming eventually a professor, which is a well-respected and very amazing path, I feel like, to call this your job and the everyday doing. Yeah. So what was your journey to becoming a professor also here at this faculty?
Interesting. Maybe I gave a bit away of my journey, you know, ending up now as a professor in economics or at the School of Business Economics. I mean, it's not how I was born, I think. You know, I'm doing research, and we'll come to talk about that on study choice. I was very much doubting whether I should go and study photography as a student. I also liked psychology or psychiatry. Psychiatry was a bit of a long study program, so I wasn't sure I was able to pull that off. Photography, maybe something that I liked to do as a hobby, and I still perform it as a hobby, black and white photography. But you know, at some point, also listening to how my parents were thinking about my study choice, they make me reflect. Okay, maybe that's a risky choice. I'm creative, but being a photographer, you know, it goes with some risks. And then I chose something else, and I thought, okay, something broad like economics. I had not such a good ideas where I wanted to end up. So I started economics, and I liked it quite a lot. And during my master's programs, I was matched to a professor who was a very great source of inspiration for me. And he really tried to push me over and beyond maybe my capacities to trigger my interest in research. And that's, you know, doing my master's thesis with him was a trigger for me to say, okay, but maybe doing something in academia would be something that I like. So I applied for a PhD position in Tilburg, and I got the job. But to be honest, I wasn't really sure what the job was about. I had some idea what it is to do a PhD, but these ideas were a bit faint, and they only materialized as I was moving along. And then I realized, oh yeah, God, I'm going to do this in-depth study for 4 years. In my case, it was a bit more than 4 years, and become a specialist in something. So I wasn't born to become what I have now become. I just grew into it. Thanks for the sharing of my professors that I came across in my career.
Well, it's an amazing story and a very cool journey also to the person you are today, and also becoming. The journey of growth, I think, is very inspiring also for others. Let me maybe talk about that point a bit more, because personally I can just relate to my feeling, and also I think many other students who are about to finish maybe their bachelor's programs or their master program. You have so many interests, passions, and opportunities laying in front of you, whether it's photography on a creative side in your case, or psychology or economics. I think a lot of students really struggle with that decision. So maybe if you can just think back when you were in that position, are there like some instrumental lessons or something, if you look back now, you say, well, that was definitely a deciding factor?
Yeah. So I mean, one of the decisive factors was to go for economics rather than photography. That was, partly driven by my parents' reaction when they thought, okay, he's going to do photography. Okay, how do we deal with that? And also, so that triggered my own thinking about what kind of future do I want. And I thought, okay, but photography is still something that I can do as a hobby, and I can be a good hobbyist at that, and I can also have a lot of pleasure into that. Mm-hmm. And if that is one of the conclusions that I drew, then I could as well do something else, like a study with a bit more body, and that's when I chose for economics. Then at my time, there were basically two tracks. There was either business or general economics, and I was not that much interested into the business part of economics. I was more interested in the public economics, microeconomics, economics of poverty, which is my master thesis was on poverty. And maybe I had some idea that I might save the world with my research on poverty. It didn't really happen, but at least I saved myself by finding some topics that I really liked digging further into. So I think that the takeaway is, I mean, get some feedback from your peers and use it to critically think about but what it is that I really like. And then make a choice what it is that you do as a hobby, like it's my case, the photography became a hobby, or what you do as a profession. So these are things that, I mean, if you manage to weight these various aspects, and maybe do away sometimes with some of the feelings that you might have. So I might have felt very strongly about becoming a very good photographer. But then if you take the time also to reflect and sit back, say, but okay, how likely is it that you become a very well-known photographer? Maybe the odds are not so high. Maybe this something with more prospects is maybe not such a bad idea in the end.
Yeah. Well, I think in hindsight, we can definitely say you made the right choice, because now I think you do something on a daily that you really enjoy, which I do. Also, sorry.
No, I really do enjoy it, yes, okay. So that also makes me stand up in the morning, right? So it's not only my family and my cycling hobby, so also my job makes me, I'm a director of a very nice club of people at the school, and that's very enjoyable to go and work together with them at research projects,
Well, that's a great bridge, I think, also to maybe another aspect we can talk about, which is, the Research Center of Education and Labor Market, in short, ROA. So maybe share a bit more about, firstly, what is ROA for someone who doesn't know it? So let's start there.
Yeah, so we are one of the departments of the School of Business and Economics. Only the way we function, so the money that we get for our wages is not purely coming from education, like in a regular research, in a regular department at the school. So in our case, we have to tender for research projects, either commercial research projects for companies, for example, or fundamental research budgets at NWO for fundamental research. So this is the way we function. So we have to put together our budgets through acquisition of research projects. commercial and fundamental research project. So that makes the dynamics in our department quite different. All of us really have to put lots of efforts in getting that money, the funding for the research that we like doing, because otherwise we'll be out of business. You know, at the same time, we do participate in the education at the school, right? So many of us are involved in the supervision of master students. We are also involved in the provision of education, both at the bachelor and at the master's level, and really much enjoy doing that. Now, that's about the business, how it functions. Now, the topics on which we work is very well focused. So it's research in the area of education. It's for example, the production of skills in education. What's the quality of teacher? Does that matter for the quality of the students? Up to how well does an education program prepares you for the labor market, as well as all kind of research related to the labor market. So it's really about the intersection between education and the labor market. That's our area of focus.
Well, I think that's, again, so there's a nice bridge to also maybe me as a bachelor student thinking about the options I have out there. Should I go for another master's degree? Should I go straight into the labor market, into the job market? And I think the theme also for what we can talk about from now on is really, how do you win in the job market? How do you make the most out of it? And I think that links nicely to the research you've done over the years.
Yeah.
So let's get started with that. Actually, let me just pose that question very broadly to you, and you can decide where we should best get started. So, well, how do we, or how does one win in the job market?
Yeah. So I'll try to order my thoughts there, because there are many aspects to your question. So one of them, so as a bachelor, I know you're last year bachelor student, and the way you start, say, okay, should I go in the job market, or should I continue with a master? So the research that we do shows that bachelor's degrees are not that well valued on the job market, in the sense that employers are not advertising for jobs for bachelor's degrees from university. If you scan vacancies, which we did with my research team last year, you see very few vacancies for bachelor's degree students. So, I mean, in your case, but in the case of all the other bachelors, I would not advise to stop. I would advise to continue. Now, the other aspect of your question pertains, okay, but is there returns also to to master's degree? And we do find evidence that the earnings and the job prospects for master's degree students are much better than for bachelor's students. I mean, the wages that they earn as a bachelor, it's not so the case that you will become jobless if you stop as a bachelor, but there are just few jobs. And the earnings that you get there are way below the wages that you can earn as a master's degree student. Now, another component of your question is, okay, but if I just graduated with my bachelor, so which direction do I go now? Part of the research that we do is about trying to measure the returns to various master's degree, and we do that in several ways. Some of my colleagues do research using graduates study. You can ask graduates from study programs how well they perform in the job market, how fast they were at getting their first job, what their earnings are. That's one aspect. It tells you something about the job market of today. And another strand of the research that we do in the labor part of ROA is doing labor market forecasting. Because when you start a study program, you might not be interested in knowing, so what do people earn today? I think you'd better worry about if there is a job or what will be the wage when you finish your education programs, because it's going to take a couple of years before you complete your full education degree. So the takeaway of the research there is that informing yourself about the job prospects, and I can say more later in our conversation, informing yourself about the job prospects of the various programs, I think is crucial to make your choice. I'm not saying that you should not worry about the things that you like or dislike. I'm not pushing you or any student in a direction of a master's degree or a bachelor degree that you dislike, because then you're not going to make it. You're not going to finish it. It's going to be a waste of time. So what our research is trying to investigate is whether the job prospects of educational programs, whether it matters when you show them to the students about to make a informed study choice. I can tell you a bit more if you so wish on how we do that.
Please
and what
ahead.
we find.
Yes, no, I think that's where it also gets very interesting. I also have some follow-up questions, but please share a bit more.
So one of the things that we've done with one of my PhD students is to conduct an experiment. We did not do that with bachelor students or master students, but we do that with students from vocational education program. So in vocational education, there is a very tight connection between what you study and the professions you are likely to end up in. So in the Netherlands, but also in other countries, lots of energy is being spent and a lot of money is being spent trying to inform students about the education program that fits them, the programs that they like, the programs that they are able to perform in, cognitively speaking. So most of the career guidance that is taking place is really about help you shape your preferences. That's actually how we started this conversation, right? You were asking me about how I shape my preferences. So it's about shaping your preferences and learning about your aptitudes. Little do we know in those career guidance programs about the job prospects of various education pathways. And as an economist, because I've grown to be an economist rather than a photographer, we are worried about the returns to education, so the return to various fields of study. So in my view, suppose you are indifferent between two types of education program, and I tell you, but if you're indifferent between A and B, and I tell you, but program A has better job prospects, so I hope you choose for A. And that's exactly what we did with those students in vocational education. So with a company, a very large company in the Netherlands that measures people's preferences in vocational education, we implemented an experiment in that program. So for some students in schools, we showed them, so we asked them what their expectations were about wages and employment. Then we showed them the true job prospects and wages in those programs that they like. And in other schools, we did not give that feedback to them. So what we found in that research is that students overestimate the wages and the job prospects of the education programs that they like. Systematically, they overestimate the returns in terms of job prospects and in terms of wages. Now, in those schools where we gave information feedback to the students, they did use that information to correct their expectations. So we told them about the true wages and job prospects. They subsequently corrected their expectations based on our information. And they make different choices in terms of occupational preferences. So they re-rank the occupations that they like. We are not able to shift someone from like a hairdresser's occupation into an engineer's occupation. The step is way too big. But within the occupations that one likes, there is a re-ranking that we are able to achieve with this information. So this research really shows that the information that we are generating, both at our institute, ROA, but also at other institutes, when well marketed, well provided to the students, can really make a difference in the type of choices that they make.
Very interesting. So just quickly to recap, if I understood it correctly. So we essentially say, well, we can predict to some extent what the future of a job market will look like, and also about the returns of that education in a sense. And as students also at high schools have a certain preference or a bias for certain fields, you can correct those truthfully by showing, well, that is what you're expected to make, for example, in one certain field. This ultimately should also increase the productivity of an economy, right? If you match the paths students take with the returns on education that are estimated, then you basically make the economy more productive. Is that roughly presenting what you're saying?
Well, I don't know if we make it more productive, but at least we get a better connection between the jobs that are in demand in the job markets compared to how the students would make their choices if they do not get that information. So in some sense, it increases the productivity of the economy as a whole, because the allocation between students and jobs can become better.
Okay. So if you follow that line of reasoning, the big question is really about, well, how can we predict the future and also the fields that are in demand in the future? And I would love to know a bit more about that, because I think predicting the future is inherently difficult. So how are you approaching that?
Yeah. So I was going to come back to that forecasting thing that you just mentioned. So one of the big projects that we do at the Institute is a labor market forecasting exercise. So what we try to do is, with the best econometrics methods that we have and the best data that we have, we try to make predictions of the supply by field of study. So the number of students that are expected in the next 6 years to enter the job market, and we are trying to estimate also the demand for those students, and the demand is driven by the demand by occupation. And also we do this labor market forecasting for the demand in 6 years time. Now what we try to do is indeed match the best methods with the best data, come up with the best predictions. Now, it's tricky to do so, and we do not always get it right. But on the other hand, knowing what the job market is doing today is also not always very informative about what kind of prospects do you expect to get when you finish a program that might take 5 or 6 years to complete. So what we try to do is to do research on the best of both worlds. So on the one hand, with some of my colleagues, we do research on the performance of graduates in the job market, and with other colleagues, we do labor market forecasting. And this labor market forecasting, we evaluate the quality of what we do. And we published the evaluation last year, in which we showed that on average, we are performing pretty well. We are performing very poorly when it comes to small niche markets, like small occupations, because of the small numbers of people in those occupations. It's much more erratic. The patterns that you see in the data is much more erratic, so it's much more difficult to predict that. Now, we update our forecasts, so we make forecasts for a period of 6 years, but we do not wait 6 years to update the forecast, because we see the economy moves as we go. Now, what happened 2 years ago? We had just published our forecast in December 2019, and then in March 2020, the COVID hit us, right? So one of the biggest worry that we had is, but what does that mean for the forecast that we showed? Then to sort of illustrate the value that the forecast might still have, one of the exercises that we did is to compare the forecasts for job development in occupation with the development of vacancies. And we could see that there were some clear patterns in there. You could see that the vacancy rates, because of the COVID, were dropping in occupation that we know from our forecast already had very poor prospect to start with. So that was somehow comforting. But I mean, your critical remark is true. I cannot predict the future of 10 years, 20 years. So I will not be able, if you have such follow-up questions, to tell you what's the occupation that will make it in 20 years. I think with the instrumentarium that we have, and with that we also work together with colleagues from the Department of Quantitative Economics, which we consult on occasions to help us do our forecasting. I mean, we are trying to do the best as we can and update those activities, and we have a big group of stakeholders that checks on the activities that we do. And with that, we hope to provide the best quality we can.
Well, I mean, that's awesome. And also, in the end, that really is, I think, a worthwhile mission to pursue. And also, as you mentioned with the experiment that you did, that it definitely has an impact also on matching it better. So maybe the natural question, not going into the perspective of 20 or 30 years, but rather more the immediate future that we see. Could you tell a bit more about, well, the current state of labor forecasting? Where are we headed to from the point where you stand?
So our latest round of forecast was published last year, and we see a great demand, unfulfilled demand in a number of domains. So that will be in teachers' occupation. So these are occupations for which if you graduate from there, you'd be more likely to find a job than when you graduate from other fields. Same holds for healthcare sector, and the same holds for technical sectors with jobs in engineering, IT, and these kind of occupations. When you think of economics, the prospects will be tended to be better for the more quantitative parts of economics than for other parts of economic domains. And I think the reason for that is, there is a great demand, there is a great supply of data, there is a great demand for data-driven decisions, and both at the company level, at the level of government. So smart students who can help us figure out what kind of music is in the data, from an economic perspective, are more likely to make it, I would say. So there are also a number of trends that you can observe from the past, because the job market of tomorrow is in part driven by yesterday's data. That is for sure. There are some trends that you can see in the data, but there are also some development that are inherent to how technology evolves, right? So technology and artificial intelligence and robotics are putting a number of jobs under strain. So it started with the middling jobs that are under pressure because of technological development. So for them, the job markets of yesterday was not very promising, but the job market of tomorrow will be even less promising. Depending on how fast artificial intelligence evolves, even the smarter kids among us might get a difficult job if the technology is able to take over our thinking process. It's a matter of debate in science at the moment, how fast the takeover will be. It will happen, but how fast, it's not so sure. And it's something we humans are pretty good at, is at dealing with very complex problems. Our analytical thinking is something that is great, but also our ability to deal with each other, like the human aspect, the human interactions. So if you look at the development in the job market for the last 25 years, you'll see that employment has been growing in those jobs, in those occupations that are very rich when it comes to problem-solving skills or analytical skills. The growth has also been very fast in those jobs that rely a lot on human interaction and interpersonal skills, especially the combination between the two. So the jobs that are rich in analytical skills and interpersonal skills are really the big grower from the last 25 years. If you ask me to predict the next 25 years, it will also be those jobs. Technology is good at substituting some of the skills that we have, like especially when it comes to things that we do on routine. You can program a computer and do those tasks for you instead. If the computer does it, maybe you become a happier worker, right? So that aspect of your task will disappear, and you'll do something else on your job that might be productive or maybe make you more happy. And these two combination of these two skills, analytical skills, problem-solving skills, and the human skills on the other hand, it's something that it's more difficult to program those with computers. So we humans still have a comparative advantage over the machines for these type of jobs, these type of occupations.
I think that's a promising takeaway, at least, to also look at technology. I can totally sympathize with the observation you made and also shared that technology will increasingly replace especially routine jobs that we see in some parts. And hence, we will need to ask the question, well, where's the labor market headed? And that's also, I think, where your forecasting comes into play. Maybe you mentioned it already, I think, in a couple of aspects. Revisiting that bachelor student or someone who's about to start a program in the undergraduate education, asking themselves, okay, what is the best thing I can do to prepare for that also a bit of uncertain future? You talked about healthcare, education, engineering, but also these non-cognitive skills, also the personal interactions between humans. So what would your advice be from your standpoint?
Yeah, so advice number one, so we do information experiments. So I would say inform yourself. That's not the whole story, right? But I think informing yourself is pretty important. There are many sources of information. So I mentioned my parents. So my kids use me also as a source of information. There's nothing wrong with that, so do it. But there are many websites around that you can consult that will tell you how programs are faring, how students perceived the study that they follow there. So these are very important source of information. And you kickstarted this talk by asking, so how do you prefer to prepare to the job market? So informing is one aspect. Now, you might want to differentiate yourself from others on the job market. Now, one way to do it, and maybe it sounds like I'm doing a commercial talk for Maastricht University, but the way we teach in problem-based learning says it all on the two skills that I just mentioned have been crucial in the last 25 years and will remain crucial. So problem-solving skills, this is something you need to train yourself in. Here we do that in class, and the social aspect of it, so the interpersonal skills, is what you need to share your knowledge among students. So I think the way we shape it in Maastricht, I mean, it's a clever way to learn those skills, and it's over and beyond the stuff that you learn, like from the textbooks or the articles. It's really about the process. Market those skills. Tell your future employer, this is how we learned at my university. I was sent away with a paper and 2 questions that I might find the answer to in that paper, but maybe not. And my task as a student was to figure that out together with other students. And so you can sell that to your employer. I mean, research also shows, and that will be maybe the third element, that extracurricular activities is something that is valued by employers. So they will look on your CV. So are you the type of person, the type of students who just did a study, or are you the type of person who did other stuff? And these other stuff, I'm being a bit vague on that, but that could be the type of things that you do. You could put that on your CV. I mean, interviewing people about their motivation in life and work is something that adds to your skill set, because as you perform these interviews, you will learn about the others, but you also learn about yourself. So I would put all these type of extracurricular. I would seek them, try to make room for them in your curriculum. I know the life of a student is difficult. There is a lot of stuff that you need to be good at, and there is a lot of exams that you need to be good at and perform. But all these other activities, they matter too, and they might help you in your study anyway. I think that 3 takeaways, right? So there are 3 tips.
Very, very nice. And maybe just quickly about the first, where you mentioned informing, you mentioned a couple of websites. Are there some references you could just mention for people to go in case they're interested?
Yeah, obviously. So, Studiekeuze 123, Study Choice 123 is one of the biggest freely accessible websites in the Netherlands that gathers information for university and University of Applied Science programs. You will find there information on student satisfaction. You will find data on the job market as well. Well, they are delivered by my team.
Your data?
My data is there. Oh. And many other information. And you could compare programs. If there is an economics program at one university, you could compare it with the same economics programs elsewhere. So that's one of the biggest sources. The other would be the keuzegids, keuzegids voor het WO, choice guide for university graduates. It's a paid website and booklet that they have, but maybe it is worth looking into that as well. I mean, these are the two biggest sources I can think of, and obviously, if you go around the universities and you visit open days, be cautious, because at the end of the day, every university is after the same group of students, right? So I'm not criticizing how we do these open days, but it's a fact. So there is a bunch of students that need to be distributed across the university. So universities are very good at marketing their program. Try to be critical if you go and visit those open days. Be critical. Ask not only those who present, but also ask the students that walk around about their feedback. So, who did they experience? Is the story as joyful as it was presented to you? So, be critical to what you hear.
Well, I think 3 great keys you presented, also linking to earlier. First, informing yourself, developing those non-cognitive skills, also in collaboration and teamwork, which are crucial also to the future, and not in doubt as far as where we stand right now. And thirdly, also those activities next to your studies to just get a broader image and also develop as a person in different areas. I think those are the 3 very practical takeaways for anyone who also is in this situation to decide and also think about what's next. Let me, with this in mind, take a bit of a critical perspective in terms of maybe university degrees in general. What I'm not suggesting personally, but rather what something is that I think a movement you see online a lot. A lot of people say, well, the barriers to education have never been lower. Nowadays, you can pretty much learn anything by jumping on YouTube, typing that question in, and I'm sure a lot of students also do that for some courses, and they get this knowledge and that wisdom in different areas very quickly. However, the way I do understand, also from what you shared with us on the labor market, there still is a very big value behind the degree. But what would you respond to someone saying, well, I think the degree is not worth it in today's time because everything changes so quickly and it's obsolete, the knowledge you learn in 5 years anyways, so why not stick with YouTube and find your own path, for instance? So how would you respond to someone saying that?
Google University, Google Search University, right? Okay, yeah. No, I mean, I have maybe 2 aspects to it. The first one is in the research that we do find that there are returns to a master's degree or to university degrees. As I said, not so much to the bachelor's degree of university, but to master's degree. So the returns are there, they are still positive. So it still seems that you learn through your master's degree. That's one aspect. Now, could you replace that learning by watching YouTube? I mean, when you do your university degree, whatever the university degree or program you follow, there is material that you will learn. That material you can always look up. The books will still be there when you finish, and the YouTube movies will still be there. But the critical way in which to judge the value of those books, articles, or YouTube movies, I mean, this is something that you also learn in the program. So that's something that is very important. You learn stuff as a student, but you also learn to be critical. And if you do not learn that, then you will not be able to choose which of the 20 YouTube movies is the one that you can trust most. And we talked about YouTube. I would watch TikTok, I mean, also there, so it's less content oriented, right? But so that's one thing. You need to be a critical thinker. Then, of the stuff that you learned through your program, some of it you might forget. Maybe the moment you leave the examination room, right? It can happen. I've seen that happen,
What I would like to admit.
But I wouldn't. Let's make no judgment. So you will forget some of those things, but you will not forget all of it, and you will still remember where to search it. And I think that and some of the key material that you need to master as a student. As a student in economics, because that's what we're doing this podcast for. That aspect of the crucial thing you will not forget. That will still be there, and you will need that to be able to to move and find your way on the job market. You cannot go to a job interview and Google search the answer to the questions that people ask you about the potential job you are aiming at. So if when we recruit and we said we do research in economics in economics of education and the labor market. If one of the first things I'll check is, do the people have some understanding of what happens in the job market? Because if they don't, that means it's going to be very difficult for me to train them also in that. So you will need that knowledge. You will not forget that knowledge. Last thing that I would like to say, with your degree, definitely, and we talked about technical change that happens at the workplace. With that degree, how high it is, even a master's degree in economics, will not be the final place you end with your knowledge. It's your starting place on the job market. So you achieve your master's degree, you go for a job, and on the job you will learn, and you will have to learn. You will learn because the stuff that you do at the job will be different than what you learned in the classroom. So it's learning that goes by itself. Or as new technologies are being implemented in the firm in which you work, on new computer program or new ways of doing accounting, you will learn that as you go. That's the learning by doing. It's a very important aspect of what we learn in the job market. But your initial education will help you master this new learning. And then you will learn by yourself, and then you will have to learn because the nature of your job is maybe likely to change. And then you will have to take courses on top of the on-the-job learning that you already do. The master's degree is not the end place when it comes to your knowledge.
Well, that I think is a great perspective to also consider when starting with any master's degree. And what I would also actually add, just echoing what you mentioned earlier, if you just learn the contents through YouTube or Google or on your own way or buy the books, well, you can do that, but you do not develop the personal traits in collaboration, in leadership, in the human interaction. And if I understood correctly, those are exactly the drivers which are here to stay, yeah, and which also ensure future success in the labor market.
Yeah.
Awesome. Didier, I learned a lot of things as we were talking about the labor market. Do you have maybe a last thing you would like to also share, some perspective you'd like to continue talking about as like a closing remark and thought on young people entering the labor market and the research you do?
Yeah, I think the closing remark would be really around the type of research that we do. I think it's important to follow your inner driver. So if you really want to do something and you there's no alternative, and ROA tells you, the job prospects are very poor, but it's really what you want to do it and make sure that you become the best at it, right? If you doubt between two programs, then do consider this type of labor market information because it might help you have a smoother start in the job market.
Well, that's a powerful lesson to end things on. So with this in mind, Didier, I would like to thank you again very much for not only taking the time, but also sharing a lot of personal stories, but also, the knowledge you accumulated at ROA. I think it's not only helpful to me, but also hopefully to a lot of people that are listening and watching on YouTube or Spotify. So with that in mind, thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to welcome the audience and the listeners and viewers to the next episode very soon. So again, thanks so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for the invitation.